This was once the future of America. A city of steel, conjured out of empty sand by the most powerful company on earth. They called it the Magic City. 100,000 dreams, streets alive with light, furnaces that never slept. And then the fire went out. Today, its cathedrals stand open to the sky, and its streets belong to the silence. This is Gary, Indiana, the city America built and then walked away from. At the turn of the century, this was all there was: empty sand dunes along the southern shore of Lake Michigan. Wind, water, and silence. Nothing for miles. Then, in Ijulin-Lu, the most powerful corporation in the world, looked at this empty wilderness and saw what no one else could. United States Steel needed a place to build, and they would not just build a factory. They would build an entire city from nothing. They named it after their chairman, Elbert H. Gary. What came next was almost unimaginable. Armies of workers descended on the dunes. They moved the earth itself, leveling sand, raising the ground. Steel mills climbed into the sky, where nothing had stood. Wide boulevards were carved into the bare land. Houses rose in neat, endless rows. In 1908, a great ship carrying Gary's own name sailed into the new harbor, and the city's first furnace roared to life. Molten steel poured into the night, and from every corner of the world they came Poles, Serbs, Italians, Mexicans, drawn by the promise of work and a new beginning. The newspapers called it the Magic City, built from sand in the blink of an eye. By 1910, where there had been only dunes, a city was rising, and no one believed it could ever fall. By the 1920s, the Magic City had become something extraordinary. But to understand how far Gary would one day fall, you first have to see just how high it climbed. Broadway, the city's great main street, blazed with light. Theater marquees glowed over crowded sidewalks. The Palace, the State, grand movie houses where thousands gathered every night to dream. This was a city that had everything. Department stores to rival Chicago's, hotels with marble lobbies, restaurants, dance halls, ballrooms that never closed, and rising above it all stood City Methodist Church, a vast, Gothic cathedral of stone. 9 stories of soaring arches and stained glass, built to stand for 1,000 years, a monument to a city that believed it would last forever. On Sundays, the pews overflowed. On weekdays, the streets surged, workers, shoppers, families. 150,000 people, and still climbing. The great furnaces of Gary Works poured out more steel than entire nations. Rails, beams, the very bones of a growing America, all of it born here on the edge of the lake. For the families who came with nothing, this was the promise made real. Steel meant a paycheck, a home, a future for your children. The American dream, cast in iron and stone. No one walking those bright, crowded streets could have imagined that within a single lifetime, almost all of it would be gone. This was the Golden Age, and, like all golden ages, it would not last. Gary Works was not just a steel mill. It was the largest steel mill on the face of the earth, a city of iron in its own right. Miles of blast furnaces, coke ovens, and rolling mills stretched along the lakeshore, breathing smoke into the sky, and it never stopped. 3 shifts a day, every day, the furnaces burned at 3,000 degrees. Rivers of molten metal lit the night orange, The air itself rang with the sound of steel being born. What came out of Gary built the modern world. The rails that crossed a continent, the beams that raised the skyscrapers, the hulls of warships, the frames of 100 million cars. And when America went to war, Gary went with it. Through the Second World War, this single city poured out the steel that armored the tanks and built the fleets, steel that helped win the war itself. By the 1950s, Gary stood at the absolute peak of its power. The mill employed 30,000 men. A paycheck from U.S. Steel could raise a family, buy a home, send a child to college. The whole city revolved around the mill. Its rhythm was the rhythm of the furnaces. Its fate was bound completely to a single company, a single industry, and no one stopped to ask the dangerous question, what would become of Gary if the fire ever went out? The company built the north side first, neat brick houses, paved streets, parks, and schools for its managers and its skilled men. A model town designed down to the last detail. But south of the tracks, another Gary grew on its own. Here came the immigrants and the great migration of black families, fleeing the south, crowding into boarding houses and narrow streets the company never planned for. Two cities, divided by a line of steel rail. And yet, life found a way. On the south side, every block had its own language. Polish bakeries, Greek diners, Mexican churches, blues drifting from open doorways on summer nights. Children walked to grand schools like Emerson and Horace Mann. Saturdays meant the shops and theaters of Broadway. Sundays meant church. It was hard, smoke-stained, crowded, and it was home. A working-class melting pot, unlike anywhere else in America. For half a century, the bargain held, the mill gave, the city grew, and the fire kept burning. For 60 years, Gary had only ever grown. No one imagined it could go any other way, but the cracks were already forming, and they would bring the whole city down. It began far away. In the 1960s, cheaper steel from Japan and Germany flooded into America. For the first time, the mills of Gary faced rivals they could not beat. Then came the machines. Automation meant the same steel could be made with a fraction of the men. And year by year, the layoffs came. 30,000 jobs began to melt away as the work disappeared. So did the people. Those who could afford to leave fled for the suburbs, taking their paychecks and their stores with them. Downtown grew quieter. Broadway's lights began to dim. The bargain that built Gary Steel for a lifetime was quietly breaking. The fire still burned, but for the first time, it was burning lower, and the city had no other fire to turn to. And then, the fire went out. In the 1970s and 80s, the American steel industry didn't just decline, it collapsed, and Gary collapsed with it. The layoffs became an avalanche. Tens of thousands of jobs vanished almost overnight. The mill that once employed 30,000 men shrank to a skeleton of what it had been. And, with the jobs gone, there was nothing left to hold the city together. Families packed up and left by the thousands. At its peak, Gary was home to 180,000 people. Within a single generation, more than half of them were gone. Downtown died first. One by one, the great stores shuttered. The hotels closed their doors. The theaters went dark. And, in 1975, even City Methodist, that mighty stone cathedral, held its final service and was simply abandoned. What remained was left to rot. Whole blocks of Broadway stood empty, and into that emptiness crept crime. By the 1990s, Gary carried a grim new title, the murder capital of America. The Magic City had become a warning, a symbol of everything that goes wrong when a town gives its entire soul to a single industry. And even now, the worst was not yet over. Step inside City Methodist Church now, and you'll find no roof at all, only open sky. Trees grow where the congregation once sang. Snow drifts down through the broken arches onto a floor of rubble and dead leaves. The cathedral, built to last 1,000 years, lasted barely 50. A few blocks away, the great schools sit silent. Emerson, Horace Mann, hallways where children once raced, now lie buried in dust and shattered glass. Classrooms slowly returning to the earth. This is what remains of the Magic City. Block after block of empty houses, storefronts staring out through broken windows, and everywhere, the green grass, vines, and trees reclaiming the streets, turning a city back into prairie. They call it urban decay. But standing here, in the silence, it feels like something older, like the slow, patient return of the wild, to the place where a city once dared to rise. Roughly 60,000 people still call it home. They live here, work here, raise their children here, on streets that hold both ruin and life. Side by side, the mill never fully went silent. Gary Works still stands along the lake, smaller now, but still pouring steel, a faint echo of the fire that once lit the whole sky. And the city fights to find its way forward. Crews tear down the most dangerous ruins, block by block. Murals rise on old brick walls. Community gardens take root in empty lots. Even the crumbling landmarks have drawn a strange new life. Filmmakers, photographers, and explorers from around the world come to witness the beauty hidden in the decay. Just across the water, the skyline of Chicago glitters on the horizon. So close, and yet a world away from all that Gary has lost. This is the city now, not the Magic City of old. Not quite a ghost town either, but something in between. A place still standing, still breathing, somewhere between memory and ruin. Gary, Indiana, a city conjured out of sand that burned brighter than almost any other and was then left to the silence. It stands today as a monument, not to steel, but to how quickly everything we build can fade. This has been The Long Quiet, where history was left behind.